Hey everyone, welcome back to Programming Challenge number 1. Once again, my name is Dylan, and in this video I'll be covering the Expert Challenge for Programming Challenge 1. If you haven't already, be sure to come to github.com/tccstemcenter and click on the Spring 2018 repository. This is where I'll be posting challenges throughout the semester. You can bookmark this page or click Watch if you're a GitHub member, and this will notify you every time I publish a challenge, or you can click Star if you're a GitHub member. This will just allow you to navigate back to this repository. So let's go ahead and get started with the Expert Challenge for Programming Challenge 1. The challenge is to create a program that could parse a website that contains some jokes and then print out one of those jokes to the screen. In order to do that, I'm going to be using PyCharm. If we go to slant.co that I have linked down here, you can see that PyCharm is the most highly recommended Python integrated development environment, or IDE. The second option is what I actually usually use, which is just a text editor called Vim. And then I use my local Python interpreter to run the programs. There is another text editor called Sublime that's very popular, and there's another IDE called Visual Studio. There are a lot of other options. Atom's gaining popularity, and it's actually about 5 years old now, but they have their own Python interpreter that you can run inside there as well. But I'm just going to be using PyCharm because it's the most highly recommended, and I really like it. You can click on Get It Here if you're on this web page, or you could just search in your web browser for PyCharm, and then click on the jetbrains.com/PyCharm link. And then click on the prominently displayed Download Now button and click on the Download for the Community. Make sure that your operating system is selected correctly here, and when you click this, it'll download a tar file, and then you can extract it and then install it to your computer, and it should be pretty straightforward. I am actually on Linux, and if I search with my package manager for PyCharm, it's going to say that I've already installed the PyCharm Community Edition with my package manager, Pacman. This is the search query that just tells my package manager to search for PyCharm. So you can see that mine's already installed. If you're on Ubuntu, for example, you could do something like apt cache search PyCharm, and that should search for it, and then you should know how to install it. I think they even actually tell us right here, if you're on Ubuntu, you could use snap. So sudo snap install PyCharm community is what you would do, and then -- classic. That's how you do it on Ubuntu, and on Arch Linux you could just do sudo pacman-s and then PyCharm community-edition. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the challenge. I'm going to open up PyCharm here, and when you're opening up for the first time, it should look something like this. It should say import PyCharm settings from custom location or do not import settings. If you don't have any settings, just click do not import settings. That should be fine. And then it's going to ask us for a UI theme. I like Darkula, so I'm going to click on that and then click Next Launcher Script. I don't really need to open things from the command line, so I'm going to click Next, and then I'm not going to select any of these plugins. Even though I do use Vim, I'm not going to use the Idea Vim Vim emulation plugin, although it is pretty good. I'm going to click Start Using PyCharm, and it's going to load up here. And once you get to the loading screen, the new project screen, just click Create New Project. And I'm going to name it joke_grabber. Pretty good name, I think. And then it's going to load up the virtual environment. While it's doing that, I'm going to close out of these links, and I'm going to search for some stuff that we're going to need. So we're going to need URL open. So I'm going to search for URL open Python 3. And I'm looking for a particular, here it is, particular link that's going to be useful for us. It is this website called pythonprogramming.net/urllib-tutorial-python-3. And if we scroll down a little bit, it's going to show us how to use urllib.request.urlopen. I'll get into that in a second. And we're also going to need beautiful soup in Python 3. So I'm going to search for this and see if we can get a good tutorial here. I'm just going to open up this one. And it actually has some older syntax on it, but it's still going to be useful for us because we're going to be using this find all function. Even though it's not underscore notation that we're going to be using the camel case notation, but it's still going to be useful. So we're going to be using the .findAll, and then all the way at the bottom here, I believe, yeah. So we're going to be using this strings or strip strings as well. We're going to be getting into that in a second. But it seems like our project is finished loading, and it looks like it has. So I'm going to uncheck that and click close. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is drop down our project and right click on the root of the project. In this case, right click on the joke grabber folder and go to new Python file. And I'm going to name it main.py. If you have kind as Python file, it's going to automatically add the .py extension. Click OK. So now we have our main.py file stored in the root of our folder. And I'm just going to make sure that everything is working okay. So I'm going to print hello. And the first time you run the main.py file, you have to right click on it and go down to run main, or you can hit Control Shift F10. So once that's run for the first time, now we have this green arrow at the top right, or we can press Shift F10 in order to run the file. So I'm just going to change this to hello world and click Shift F10 to make sure that it updates. So now you can see we have world down there. So now that's working properly, and we can press Shift F10 or click the green run button to run our project. All right, so now that we know everything's working properly, I'm going to create a doc string so that other people know what this program does, and I will know if I look at it later on. So it is going to print a random joke from a website. It's not the best doc string, but it'll do for now. And now we need to figure out how we're going to pull down the web page and parse it. So the website that I'm going to be using for my source of random jokes is called goodbadjokes.com. And it's going to give us about 10 jokes here. And if we refresh the page, then you can see we get different jokes every time. That's going to add to the randomness, and it's actually going to work out in our favor. But it looks pretty simple. All these jokes are just stored into these little white boxes. And so that's what we're going to be parsing out later on. So let's go ahead and figure out how we're going to pull down this web page. We're going to be using the URL open function. And in order to do that, you can use just that URL open. First, we need to import it. So we need to do from URL lib.request import URL open. And I know that that's the case because if we come back to this Python programming.net tutorial, it tells us we can import URL lib.request. So this request is actually a module in and of itself, and it's stored inside the URL lib module. So we could use the URL open function that's stored inside the request module that's stored inside the URL lib module. So it's kind of going down a rabbit hole there. And they use the less concise version of importing the entire module. And I'm going to use the more concise version of just importing URL open from the module itself. Now we've done that, we have access to that function. And then I'm going to make this a little bit more concise. And we're actually going to be using URL later on, so I'm going to store URL into a variable. I'm going to Control-C copy that, Control-V paste into the string, and then we're going to URL open that URL. I'm just going to print it. You guys can see what it looks like. It's going to be a little request, a little HTTP response object. And then we can use this to read in the entire web page. We go back to the tutorial on pythonprogramming.net. They tell us we can use the object.read. So they actually don't use the method that I would recommend using. Whenever you're opening up a file or a request in Python, you should use the with block syntax. So that starts with the with statement, and then you use the function that's going to open up the file or the request, and then you do with that function as, and then I'm going to call this request, and then I'm just going to print out request. So this is what you should use once again with a request. You should use with URL open, URL as request, and then it's going to store the result of this function into request with the added benefit of when we actually exit out of this with block, it actually closes the request. So instead of having to do request.close, which I don't even know if they do it, yeah, something like this. In this case, it's a file. So you could use, instead of doing file equals open whatever, you use with open file name as write as f, for example, and then you can use f inside there, f.write, and you don't have to call .close. So with the request, as they have it in the tutorial, where we would do something like request equals URL open URL, you'd have to do your code, and then at the end you have to do request.close. It's just more concise and built into Python to do it this way, so it's considered better practice. So that's how I'm going to be doing it. Now I have a request object inside this with block, and we can do .read. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like. I'll print that out really quickly. And we get the entire web page inside of this byte string. That's what the B means. So you can see it's really, really long. We get a bunch of \ns, and that's the entire web page. We go back to the goodbadjokes.com and hit F12. You can do that in Chrome or Firefox. It's going to show us the doc type and then the HTML and the head, body, and all the stuff inside of it. That's exactly what we get in here inside this byte string. So we have successfully pulled down the entire web page with request.read. The only thing to watch out for, I'm going to keep this print statement, is that if our internet connection is down, I'm going to disconnect from the internet here, then this is going to fail. So if I rerun this while my internet's down, we're going to get this urllib.error.url error. So we should try and accept this because we don't want it to fail and print out all this ugly error nonsense. So we're going to do a try accept URL error. And then I'm just going to print error for now. This is still going to throw an error. It's going to throw another error actually, because URL error is not defined. So we have to be sure to import it. And it's coming from the urllib.error module, similar to how the URL open function is coming from the request module from urllib. So we're going to use urllib.error, import URL error. Spell that correctly. Then we're going to get that we can now use URL error. And then I'm going to change this to be a better error statement. So there was an error opening URL. And then I'm going to use the .format syntax. I'm passing it the string URL that we defined above. And then I'm using the squiggly brackets that are going to get replaced with URL. Let's go ahead and see how that looks. Now we get there was an error opening URL, goodbadjokes.com. And I actually don't want to continue with the program, so I'm going to call exit, passing 1, indicating that there was an error. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to store this request.read into this variable that I'm going to create just now called HTML. So I'm going to read all the raw HTML into this HTML variable here. But if there's an error trying to read it, for example, our internet connection is down, it's actually not going to create that variable. And so I want to exit to not continue with the program. And now I'm going to be using the beautiful soup function to basically certify this raw HTML and so that we can parse it. So I'm going to turn my internet connection back on. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to come back to this beautiful soup thing and wait for my internet to come back on. Refresh the page. So we're going to be using this soup.findAll function. But instead of using the underscore notation, we're going to use camel case notation because that's the newer way of doing it, I believe. So let's go ahead and use beautiful soup HTML. And it's obviously going to give us an error because we haven't defined what beautiful soup is. So we need to import it. And it comes from the BS4 module. And BS4 isn't actually built into the Python standard library. Let's just go ahead and finish this. From BS4 import beautiful soup. And because it's not built into the standard library, we have to manually import it. You could, if you're running on Linux, for example, use pip install. But because we're doing this in PyCharm, we need to go into our settings and import it manually. Let's go to settings, and we're going to go to this drop down where it says project : and the name of our project. So drop that down and then click on project interpreter. When you do that, it's going to show us all the packages that are installed currently for our virtual environment for our project. And there's this little plus sign over here. When you hover over it, it says install. click on that and search for the BS4 package because that's what we need to install. So click on that and then click install package. And as long as you're connected to the internet, it should say package BS4 installed successfully. And now we have this beautiful soup 4 package and the BS4 package, which is what we need. So click OK to close that. And now we have that BS4 is defined and we can import beautiful soup properly. Let's go ahead and print this to see what it looks like. Shift F10. And we get the entire web page again, but instead of on one line and inside of a byte string, we get it formatted in this pretty format. That's because when we're printing out this beautiful soup object, a beautiful soup actually knows that it's getting printed out, and so it formats it a little bit nicer for us. And we're also getting this little warning here that's saying that we should tell it what kind of parser we're going to be using. So this is HTML.parser is the easiest parser to work with because it comes with beautiful soup. There are other ones like LXML, for example, and it's arguably better to work with, but for our purposes, HTML.parser is going to work, and we don't actually have to install anything, so it's a lot easier. And it works pretty well too, so we're going to use that. And when we rerun this, it shouldn't give us that warning. So it looks good. Now I'm just going to store this into a soup variable. Soup equals beautiful soup, passing in all the raw HTML and telling it what kind of parser we're going to use. So now we have our soup object, and we're now going to be using this find all function to parse out all of the tags in the joke website that we need to. We pressed F12 to get our inspector open. If you're not in the inspector tab, you can click on it. And then if there's this thing at the top left, you can click on it. And when you start hovering over elements on the page, it will show you the containers on the page they're called divs, or they're called tags. And they just hold content inside them. And when you hover over them, it tells you what they are. So if we go to the very top, it says that there's a div with a class equal to joke body wrap. And it looks like that is where our jokes are stored. If we hover over this one, it's a DT tag. If we hover over this one, it's a DD tag. If we go just above both of those, it looks like it's inside this div. So if you left click, it'll show up in the inspector down here. When you hover over stuff down here too, it shows up in the web page up here, just like we were doing with the inspector mouse thing. So it looks like this is where all of our jokes are. It's inside all of these divs where the class equal joke body wrap. Let's go to the next one. Instead of clicking that, you can actually click Control-Shift-C, and it'll pop open this thing. Go to the next one. So yeah, there's another div where class equals joke body wrap. Let's go to the third one. Another div where class equals joke body wrap. So it looks like they're all inside divs where the class equals joke body wrap. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do soup.find all, and instead of using the underscore notation, we're going to be using the camel case. We're going to be wanting to find all the divs. So this is going to find all the divs. But we also want to specify to only grab the divs where the class name equals joke-body-wrap. The way to do that is with this dictionary syntax as the second parameter. So we're going to say class : joke-body-wrap. And so what this is going to do is it's going to run through, well, it's going to find every div on the page where the class equals joke body wrap. Pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and print that to see what it looks like. And now we get this really long list. It starts here with this square bracket, and we get the first div class equals joke body wrap, and we get this a class equal permalink inside there, and we get another div class equal joke body wrap there, so it looks good. So let's store this into a variable called joke_containers with an S. So this is what I'm calling all the joke containers. For example, this is one joke container, and this is another joke container, and this is another joke container. So this list that we have compiled over here with the soup.findAll is returning all the joke containers inside the web page. Now, since it's a list, we can run through every single one in there with for joke container in joke containers. And I'm just going to print out each joke container with a bunch of tildes after it so we can more clearly see what it looks like. So here's one joke container between the tildes, another joke container. So it's looking pretty good. Let's go back to our web browser and look inside of these divs with the classes equal to joke body wrap. The first thing we see is an A tag with a class equal to permalink, and inside of there we have the DT tag. We open that up, yep, that has the joke, the question for the joke inside there, and then we also have the DD tag. So it looks like all the A tags inside of here have the jokes inside them. So we need to delve down one more level, and the way that I'm going to do that is with find children. So joke container dot find children, and this is going to work very similar to the find all. In fact, they both start with find, but it's a little bit more concise because we already have a element here, and we're just going to find all the children. We want to find all the A tags, and we're going to use the same syntax where the class equals, instead of joke body wrap, we're going to use permalink. Because if we go back to the web page, we're trying to find all these A tags inside of these divs where the class equals permalink. So that should parse out all those A tags. Let's go ahead and print that. Hit Shift F10. I spelled something wrong, I did. So one I in permalink. Shift F10. And there we have all of the A tags where the class equals to permalink. Since find children returns a list, we actually just want to grab the first element in there. That's going to give us just the A tag. And then we're going to want to run through all the contents in there. I'm going to do .contents. And that's going to grab all of the contents inside there. The reason that I'm doing that is because I see that once we grab this A tag where the class equals permalink, we can just grab the contents inside of there, and the way that we do that is with .contents. And so now I get a list that has at least one line, at least one thing in there, hopefully, and then maybe two, or maybe more. So I'm going to run through all of these items in the list. I'm going to do for line in joke container dot find children sub0.contents. And that's going to give us each line in that joke container. And I'm just going to print out each line. And we're going to see what it looks like. I also want to print out all the tildes again so that we can more clearly distinguish between different jokes. So here's one joke. Oh, this one has 3 different lines. Interesting. This one has 2 lines, and so do most of them. Let's run it one more time. And I guess my internet temporarily went down or something. This one has a bunch of lines. So it looks like they have at least 1 line and sometimes more than 2. So let's look at the type of each line. Let's see what each looks like. Let's just do type line, rerun this. And some of them are bs4.element.tag. Some of them are navigable strings. Let's rerun this just to make sure that some of them are navigable strings, some of them are tags. So you can't actually get the contents of a navigable string, and instead I'm just going to be converting those to a string. So I need to check to see if this line is a navigable string or if it's a tag. And the way that I'm going to be doing that is by doing if, let's do it this way, if line is navigable string, and I'm just going to print it's a string, else print it's a tag. And I want to import navigable string up above. That's from bs4 import navigable string. And hopefully this will work. So we've figured out whether it's a tag or a string, hopefully. It doesn't look like we are, and I think it's because we need to check. I don't think you need to do it this way. I think you need to do if type line equals navigable string. And now it should tell us, yeah, it's a string or it's a tag. So sorry I did that wrong the first time. And now we can treat these 2 different cases differently because we have to. So I'm going to create a new variable called clean line, and if it's a navigable string, then I'm just going to convert the line into a string, just like that. And if it is a tag, then I'm going to do clean line equals line dot. And let's go back to the tutorial. It's called stripped strings, and this is going to return a list with either 0 or more strings inside of that list. So stripped strings. All right, so now let's go ahead and print clean line and see what the different types are. So there are a bunch of generators. So I am going to convert this to a tuple so we can see it better. So I'm typecasting this clean line to a tuple, and that doesn't look good because it looks like we're converting strings sometimes into a tuple, so that's not good. But the times that we actually get the tag, it looks like we're converting that to a list. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this into one as one item in one tuple, and you have to have this comma here, or you could do a tuple like this. And I think this is more concise because it's a little weird to have just a floating comma at the end. And so I might get confused. So I always just do tuple like this in order to convert something into a tuple. Although this actually might not work because it might convert the string into a tuple once again. So let's see how that works. Yeah, so it's converting the string into a tuple. So you do need a comma here in order to tell it that this is going to be the first and only item in that tuple. So there we. Oh no, it's still not working. Let's try this. So there we go. Now that's very strange. Now we're converting this into a tuple of only one item. And the reason that I'm doing that is just for consistency, so we can parse out the stuff later on more easily. Actually, I don't think we're ever going to get more than one item. So I'm going to shift this into the else block so we only print out the clean lines when they're a tag. So let's do that. And sometimes they're completely empty. That's very strange. And here we go. So sometimes they do have multiple elements. So yes, I do want to convert this into a tuple of one element, and I do want to do line.strip strings because sometimes they have a bunch of different strings in there. So now what I want to do is run through every single line in the clean line, and I'm actually going to rename this clean lines with an S because it could have multiple lines in it. So now I'm going to do for clean underscore line in clean lines, and then I'm going to do joke dot append clean underscore line dot strip. I just want to strip away any spaces, new lines, or backslash or carriage returns. And every single time I'm iterating through each joke container, I want to make a new list called joke. And then I want to append every single line into there. But I also want to make sure that the list isn't empty. So I'm going to say if clean underscore line. So we only want to append stuff into there if it's not empty. So sometimes we're getting these weird empty lists. I don't know why. But sometimes we do. We want to make sure that the clean line isn't empty. And then I want to make another list outside of the entire for loop called jokes. And this is going to store each one of these lists, joke. So once we have a fully fledged joke from each joke container that we've parsed out properly, we want to do jokes.append joke and make sure this is on the right level of indentation. So we're going to run through every joke container, and at the end of the loop we're going to append that to the jokes container. So that's looking pretty good. I also want to make sure that joke isn't empty because it looks like sometimes we might get 4 empty jokes in a row. Don't really know why. I want to double check to make sure that joke isn't empty. So I'm going to say if joke, then jokes.append joke. This just makes sure that the joke isn't empty before we append it in there. All right, now we can go ahead and print out jokes and see what it looks like. Now we have a long list of jokes, and so in each index we have a another list that contains just one joke. It looks pretty good. Let's do the same thing that we did in the previous video where we select a random index from the jokes container. So I'm going to do jokes subrandom from 0 to the length of jokes minus 1. All right. And random isn't defined, so we need to import it from random import randint. Let's go ahead and run this, and we should just get one joke inside of a list. So we do. And we need to format this a little bit nicer, and the way that I'm going to do that is by using the join syntax here. So I'm going to do the same format that we used in the last tutorial, \n/t, right angle bracket space, and then I'm going to join every single line with that spacer, with this token here. So we're going to see how that works. Let's go ahead and hit Shift F10. And now, if we only have 2 lines, it's going to print out the first line normally, and then it's going to join both of those lines together with this \n/t, which is a new line in tab character, then the right angle bracket and space. And so then it's going to join the second line with the new line tab and the right angle bracket. So now we've completed the challenge, and we have figured out how to parse goodbadjokes.com for a random joke, and then print that out to the screen formatted nicely. I hope that this tutorial was useful for you, and I hope that you'll take it with you and do great things in programming. So I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks everybody for watching.